Coming up on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Alaina Pinto this week, pro-cannabis political candidates have a good week at the election polls led by the election of the first female governor of Virginia, Abigail Spanberger. No one is more happy about that than our own Virginia correspondent, Joe Parsons.
I'm Joe Parsons with a special election results report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. The 2025 Virginia gubernatorial election will go down as an historic day in the Commonwealth.
In New Jersey, home grow is a possibility in the Garden State now that Mikie Sherrill is headed to the State House in Trenton. Plus, the state of Oklahoma shuts down their signature gathering for their adult use initiative, disappointing advocates in the Sooner State and the federal cause. Plus, a recent Gallup poll reinforces that a majority of Americans want legalization of cannabis, but Republican support for the reform cause drops by 13% in 1 year. And a recent study of intoxicating hemp-derived THC products in Missouri claims that 96% of those products sold in that state exceed the federal definition of legal hemp items of 0.3%.
And it went up the sugar confections, space poppers.
It was the 9th annual Harvest Cup competition in Worcester, Massachusetts, and Space Poppers won multiple awards on day one. Most of the talk was about the savory tactics and the threatening Ballot initiative by prohibitionists in Massachusetts trying to shut down the industry.
We can't take it for granted, even though common sense would tell us that no one in their right mind would vote to eliminate an entire industry. But you got to go and vote. Having that opinion won't mean anything unless you go and vote.
The fact that people are saying, oh, well, it's written there and that's okay. You shouldn't have to be like, oh, you're lying to me. Let me double check. Let me take a look at this. Instead of just believing the person that comes up to you and is telling you certain parts of it. It's completely unethical. It's wrong in every way.
This is going to happen. It's going to get on the ballot. It's up to us as an industry to come together and make sure that the general public knows what those ballot questions actually are.
All that and more on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Alaina Pinto. Next.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Cannabis Coast to Coast News, WPCM TV's weekly documentation of the fight to end cannabis prohibition in this country and around the world. I'm Alaina Pinto. It's been an interesting week of election results in what is considered to be an off election, since the biggest results were centered around governor races in Virginia and New Jersey. In fact, in both of those states, Democrats won by decisive margins. Abigail Spanberger in Virginia and Mikie Sherrill in New Jersey. We start in Virginia with Joe Parsons.
I'm Joe Parsons with the Virginia Cannabis Connection by Higher Education's Coffee Talk, sponsored by 97.5 3WB, and reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. The Virginia's gubernatorial election has caught a lot of media attention because not only did Abigail Spanberger have a large amount of high-profile political support, but it has led to discussions from many about not if, but when the adult-use cannabis market will open. J.M. Pedini, Executive Director for the Virginia chapter of NORML, was one of the first to weigh in on the issue, stating that, quote, Governor-elect Spanberger's administration has an opportunity to do what the Youngkin administration could not, implement a well-regulated adult-use cannabis market that prioritizes consumer safety, product transparency, and public revenue over illicit sales. Further adding, the framework is already in place thanks to years of legislative work and public input. With an administration poised to act, the focus now shifts from planning to building a retail system that Virginians can trust. J.M. Pedini was also a key speaker and worked with the state's Cannabis Oversight Commission. Now, the big question remains, how long will all this take now that we have an administration poised to act? The answer lies in the hands of the General Assembly. What was so devastating about the vetoes from the past 2 years was the fact that the House of Representatives and the Virginia Senate had passed bipartisan bills for 2 years in a row. Now let's compare that in contrast to Pennsylvania, where Governor Josh Shapiro has practically begged his House and Senate just to work together to pass a bill so that he could sign it. So now it's time for our General Assembly to get yet another round of bills pushed through to the governor so that she can sign them. If we take a closer look at the current seats in the House, it paints a positive picture that the Democratic-led bills should go through just as they did last year. And even more interesting, most of the Republicans that kept their seats this year were the same to vote yes to this and the other cannabis bills that ultimately got rejected. So the path through the House looks positive, and a similar outlook is expected in the Senate. Once the adult use bill gets signed into law by our governor, it will go back to the hands of the Virginia Cannabis Control Authority to implement the license processes, establish fees, and set the testing and standards to match those already in place for the medical market. It could be a safe estimate of early 2027 to see the first round of operators in the Commonwealth. The next question will be, will the already established players in the medical market have the first shot at adult use licenses, or will it be open to anyone with a dream to become a retailer? You can bet I'll be on top of that and many other questions in the future. Well, that's going to do it for Higher Education's Coffee Talk, sponsored by 97.5 3WB and reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Joe Parsons. Until next time, stay lifted.
Here in Massachusetts, most of the attention on cannabis this past few weeks has been on some of the sordid tactics signatures are being collected to drastically reform the existing adult use laws in the Bay State. This past weekend, the Harvest Cup competition and trade show was held for the 8th time at the DCU Center in Worcester, Massachusetts. Executive producer Jimmy Young was on hand with Massachusetts reporter Curtis Emery, and they took a sampling of opinions from the pro-cannabis crowd about the ballot initiative that is going on in the Bay State that could drastically impact the existing industry.
I'm Curtis Emery with the Bay State Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News, and I'm here on location at the Harvest Cup in Worcester, Massachusetts. And when I look around, I see so many of the great people who make the cannabis industry in Massachusetts what it is, and the same people whose livelihoods are on the line with the Ballot initiative here in the state to overturn adult sales in Massachusetts.
How upsetting is that, Jim?
It is infuriating, and the reason why is because, like you said, I put everything into this, literally everything, life savings and everything. But at the same time, the reason why I'm here is because of a passion for the plant itself, because I came from the medical side. It's very important that people get access to these things. The medical market itself does not provide the best access. The adult use side provides access. So I'm huge on that one. I know how the campaigns are being run right now. $8 or $9 they get per signature. They're being very forceful to get people's signatures. They may be saying things they shouldn't be necessarily saying, but it's a well-organized campaign. If you estimate how much they're going to spend, it's about almost $1 million they're going to spend just in signatures alone. This is a well-organized campaign. You have to take it seriously. This is going to be a fight.
Do you think that you have the unity of people in the industry to understand how serious this is?
I think unity on this issue is very possible because it's obviously existential, right? If cannabis for adults is not legal, a lot of people's hopes, dreams, blood, sweat, and tears will be going down the drain. So you can't just sit back and say, how did this happen? We need to be actively, presenting a cohesive, coherent counterpoint to the prohibitionist rhetoric. And obviously the reports of, lying to people to get a signature is very clearly motivated by the money these people are getting paid. But, a signature doesn't mean a vote. So even if you got tricked and you signed it, go encourage people to vote. Go encourage people in your friend circle, your family, to go vote. Even if you're a single issue voter, great. This is an issue that literally, will make or break this industry.
And it's disturbing to me from that standpoint, as somebody who has been a part of the political process in Florida and Massachusetts and sees how they are completely using this process to manipulate the system and to take small businesses who have worked so hard. Bada Bloom and other companies, especially small companies, we've spent so many years raising money. We've worked so very hard to try to make it within a highly regulated business where we're not allowed to write anything off with taxes, nothing, and they want to come after us and just make it all go away.
That's unfortunately the country that we live in. It's controlled by corporations. Politicians are going to listen to the lobbyist that has the most amount of money. So if our opposition has a significant amount of money that they're spending on lobbyists, then they're going to get the ear of those politicians. So Are you telling me that the political system in our country is corrupt and that
No, they're not in business right now.
I mean, exactly. So I mean,
I've been Curtis Emery with the Bay State Report here for Cannabis Coast to Coast News at the Harvest Cup in Worcester, Mass. And I hope we'll be here next year.
The governor's race in New Jersey was not as contentious as the one in Virginia, since the Garden State already has a vibrant adult use market. The new governor-elect there, another Democrat named Mikie Sherrill, is on record saying that she wants to move forward with allowing home grow. And that's always been a target issue since the beginning in New Jersey. So here's reaction on the election from the Garden State with Jill Goldsberry.
Hey, welcome back to the Cannabis Coast to Coast News Report for New Jersey. I'm Jill Goldsberry with Cannabis Coast to Coast News, and we are pivoting to the November 2025 election, which has given the East Coast cannabis market a major jolt. The big news is the victory of Democrat Mikie Sherrill in the New Jersey governor's race. And according to the normal analysis, this is a clear win for policy progress and a major defeat for the cannabis status quo. Right now, New Jersey's market has been legalized since 2021, and we're still crippled by several problems. No home grow, high consumer prices, and uneven access. Sherrill's office promised to keep those limits, promised to assist in changing those limits, as where her opponent, Jack Ciattarelli, wanted to keep the limits locked in place. And the stakes could not have been higher for this election, for our market. And so Sherrill's victory means we can finally expect action on these critical issues. She's voiced strong support for expanding New Jersey's adult use market, and this includes the critical step of allowing home grow, cultivation, giving consumers the freedom and the ability to grow their own, which will directly combat the soaring prices. And this administration is also expected to prioritize improving consumer access, safety, and overall affordability across the board. And this will move New Jersey into a far more friendly, mature cannabis market, which this election has really made it a turning point so that constituents will be treated fairly in the cannabis market by this administration. So the Garden State is really set for an expansion, and we will see in the next 100 days what's going to happen with the new Sherrill administration in New Jersey. And speaking of affordability in cannabis, a new brand I wanted to let you know about is called Dragonfly Cannabis. You may see their red logos pop up from time to time, and you may also start seeing them in New Jersey. It's a brand out of Michigan, known for affordable, very effective cannabis. They've landed in New York City, and now they're expanding into our New Jersey market. So check them out and look out for them soon. I'm Jill Goldsberry with the Cannabis Coast to Coast New Jersey Report. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next report.
Another development in the cannabis reform movement this week comes from Oklahoma, where over the past 3 months, organizers had hoped to collect enough signatures to get adult use on the ballot for next fall. Unfortunately, that effort fell short this week, and organizers had to curtail the initiative. Needless to say, that makes Kimmy Cannabis sad, but not defeated. Here's Kimmy.
I am Kimmy Cannabis from Canna Talk About It with your Oklahoma Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Efforts to bring adult use cannabis to Oklahoma have hit another roadblock. The petition drive for State Question 837 failed to gather enough signatures to qualify for the ballot. This marks the second time Oklahomans haven't turned out in strong numbers for adult use reform. With so many licensed businesses going inactive and a shrinking medical-only market, many hope that adult use access would help our program thrive. Instead, the lack of signatures leaves the industry facing another year of uncertainty, limited growth, and tougher conditions for patients and providers alike. Meanwhile, new rules that took effect November 1st change how Oklahomans can possess or consume cannabis in vehicles. Senate Bill 786 now makes it illegal to have an open container of marijuana in the passenger area of the vehicle on a public road. The law also prohibits smoking or inhaling cannabis, including secondhand smoke. while driving or riding a motor vehicle. Even licensed medical patients are not exempt from these rules. All cannabis must be stored in a sealed container and kept out of reach while traveling. The message is clear. Safe transport and responsible use are now state law. And if that's not enough, the new patient portal system for medical card applications has been glitching since its launch. The switch to the new platform now requires patients to enter their social security number, which many feel is an overreach into personal privacy. Patient recommendations in businesses across the state that rarely have had issues before are now dealing with one problem after another. And patients, well, they don't have patience because this is their medicine and delays mean suffering. That's it for your Oklahoma report. Peace, love, and all that good stuff.
There's a new Gallup poll out regarding the legalization of cannabis. Over the first 2 weeks of October, 1,000 adults were polled, and there has been a decrease in the total percentage of support for legalization. It's still a majority of 64%, but that's a 4% drop from the same poll last year. Since Gallup is a political pollster, the reason for that drop is tied to the Republican Party, which dropped 13 percentage points. Still, 85% of Democrats want to see it legalized, and 66% of independent voters support legalization too. Republican support has dropped to 40%. It was at 53% last year. Gallup reported that this drop in support from Republicans reflects perceptions that President Trump's aggressive actions supposedly limiting the entry of drugs in the United States has resonated with the president's base. Even though, as Gallup noted, quote, that the impact of these actions on drug imports, sales, and addiction in the U.S. is unclear so far, unquote. Perhaps if those 1,000 people who were polled watched Amie Carter's story coming up next, they would change their anti-legalization feelings. In her Michigan report this week, Amie has a story about a family whose child was stricken with cancer and then, as a last resort, used cannabis to combat that disease. Amie's Michigan report is sponsored by Wally's Wonder World, a website featuring handmade customizable humidors.
This is mold on wheat. This is mold on weed. And this is what this Wonderworld plant is supposed to look like. Do you want to make sure this never happens to your precious flower? Check out the handmade humidors by Fenton, Michigan craftsman Gregory Johnson. Each humidor can hold 1 ounce of your stash, and it comes with a Boveda humidity pack. You care about your flower, so protect it inside a humidor made with American-grown maple, cherry, or sapele wood. Check out their website at wallyswonderworld.com. There you'll find the famous award-winning Hakuna Matata No Worries Humidor. You'll also find a variety of humidors with different designs. They even customize accessories like doobie tubes, grinders, and even a classic roach clip from the 70s. Treat your stash with class with a custom-made, handmade humidor from wallyswonderworld.com, and never worry about moldy weed again.
I'm Amie Carter from the Michigan Wheatsters with this week's Michigan Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. We often talk about the healing power of cannabis, and I know its impact personally. For my son Jaden, it helps control his outbursts and anxiety following his autism diagnosis, allowing him to thrive and move toward a high school graduation. It's success stories like Jaden's that makes me so proud to share another powerful Michigan's family story, now captured in a new documentary. Meet the family who faced every parent's worst nightmare. Their young daughter, Gray, was battling childhood cancer. After finding out she was allergic to chemotherapy, they were forced into a desperate situation and a decision that changed everything.
Walked in with a computer on wheels. And at that time, my daughter was starting to kind of come around. I was on one side of her. My husband was on the other. And she was just sitting there with her passy in her mouth, looking around. And they proceeded to show us an image of a very brightly lit, large brain tumor.
Baseball-sized tumor in the center of her brain.
So we saw the image. It was terrifying. We knew immediately what it was. And I think the next words out of the doctor's mouth was that it was aggressive and inoperable.
In the face of long odds, they turned to cannabis oil. The incredible results are nothing short of a medical miracle. The new documentary, Saving Gray, takes you inside the raw, intimate, and emotional fight for her survival. It's a powerful, unvarnished look at the faith and conflict this family endured just to bring this life-saving truth to light. You can watch the full film, Saving Gray, right now on YouTube.
He chose to lower her dose to the very smallest dose out of 21 kids in the entire trial. She was on the very lowest dose. So she took that very lowest dose, next to nothing, alongside cannabis oil for the remainder of the trial, which was 1.5 years. And she is the only one out of all 21 kids who had consent to use cannabis oil. She is the only one out of 21 kids who ever got clear scans. And to this day, she's the only one out of all 21 kids who hasn't relapsed and who doesn't have cancer anymore. All other 20 kids, when they came off of the trial, their tumor growth resumed. I was always told at every scan post-trial to expect to see some growth and not to panic because they were seeing it in the other kids. Her scans stayed crystal clear. They're crystal clear to this day. So they were wrong.
That's another story about how cannabis can change a child's world. So when prohibitionists bring up the question, what about the kids, we can say with confidence that there are parents like Grace and like me who can confirm it saved their child's life. And we are thankful for that. I am Amie Carter with Michigan Weedsters, and that's it for this week for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
The Michigan Report is sponsored by Wally'sWonderworld.com.
That'll do it for the A block, our first section of Cannabis Coast to Coast news, but we have plenty more state reports to share, including the election of a new mayor in New York City who is a regular in that city's dispensary scene. Cannabis Coast to Coast news continues after this.
Corporations take it over. This plant, it's all about money with everybody, but the problem is nobody can pay their bills. Nobody pays their bills.
Your cannabis business could be overpaying by hundreds of thousands of dollars in federal income taxes because of one simple assumption that you're making about your accountant. A dispensary owner in Colorado called me frustrated as hell. He'd been working with the same accountant for 3 years. His accountant said, "What's 471C?" Here's what the ignorance of that accountant was costing this business owner: $180,000 every single year for 3 years. 471C has been around since 2017. We're talking about an 8-year-old tax provision that many cannabis CPAs don't fully understand. 471C is one of the most complex and highly debated tax strategies in the cannabis industry. If you want to make sure you're not leaving any money on the table, I'm offering free 471C reviews this month. Link in the description.
Accounting Buds has grown into Buds Group, the same award-winning quality, now with more service offerings. Buds Group, your best buds in the biz.
Looking for PR that over-delivers on expectations? At Maverick Public Relations, they pair big agency experience with personalized attention. From launching award-winning brands to securing top-tier media hits, their data-driven communications team helps visionary leaders and entrepreneurs rise above the media noise. Maverick PR is responsive, collaborative, and relentless about results and ROI. Visit themaverickpr.com and make headlines together.
If you want to make history, if you want to be part of history, if you want to say you helped legalize marijuana in America, now is the time to join us.